Buddhist Emptiness explained, "We live in a world overloaded with information, choices, and conflicting identities. Yet beneath all our progress, the same ancient problems persist: suffering, dissatisfaction, fear of loss, and the struggle to make sense of who we are. We cling to possessions, relationships, and ideas, only to find they slip through our fingers. At the root of this struggle lies a fundamental misunderstanding of reality itself. Buddhism names this misunderstanding as grasping at inherent existence, the belief that things exist permanently, independently, and solidly. The radical insight of Buddhist philosophy is that this belief is an illusion. Things are not as fixed as they appear. They are empty, not empty of reality, but empty of independent, unchanging essence. This teaching of shunyata, emptiness, is one of the most profound and misunderstood insights in human thought. Far from being a doctrine of nihilism, it offers practical tools to dissolve suffering, heal conflicts, and awaken a mind of clarity and compassion. In this script, we will explore emptiness not as abstract philosophy, but as a practical key to solving life's deepest problems. Roots of Zen, from India to China. When we trace the origins of Zen, we must begin not in a monastery or under a painted scroll of Bodhidharma, but beneath a tree in India 2,500 years ago. There, a man named Siddhartha Gautama, later known as the Buddha, sat in meditation, determined not to rise until he saw the truth of existence. His victory was not a revelation from a god, nor a metaphysical theory, but a direct seeing into the nature of mind. Suffering arises from craving, craving arises from ignorance, and liberation is possible through clear insight. From this awakening flowed the entire river of Buddhist tradition, and Zen, though shaped by centuries and cultures, is nothing other than a continuation of that current. The historical Buddha and the meditation tradition. The Buddha's teaching emphasized direct experience. While he offered frameworks, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, dependent origination, his central method was meditative practice. Two primary forms were cultivated: samatha, calm abiding, which steadies and focuses the mind, and vipassana, insight, which penetrates reality as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and without fixed self. Unlike the ritual-heavy Vedic religion of his time, the Buddha shifted the emphasis from sacrificial fire altars to the fire of mindfulness. Liberation was not something granted by priests, but discovered in one's own heart-mind. This insistence on meditation as the path to awakening set the seed of Zen. Zen's later slogan, pointing directly to the human mind, echoes the Buddha's own rejection of metaphysical speculation. In fact, when asked about the cosmos or the afterlife, the Buddha often refused to answer, likening such questions to a man struck by a poisoned arrow, who refuses treatment until he knows every detail about the arrow's maker. Zen would inherit this radical practicality. Early Buddhist schools and the rise of Mahayana. After the Buddha's death, his followers gathered to preserve his teachings, eventually codified into the Pali Canon in theravada, countries and a broader body of scriptures across Asia. Over centuries, Buddhism diversified into schools, each emphasizing different aspects: scholastic analysis, devotional rituals, or meditative absorption. One major development was the rise of Mahayana Buddhism around the 1st century CE. Mahayana emphasized the bodhisattva ideal. Instead of seeking individual liberation alone, practitioners vowed to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. New sutras emerged, such as the Prajnaparamita, perfection of wisdom, texts, which introduced the radical teaching of shunyata, emptiness, that all phenomena, even doctrines and practices, are empty of inherent existence. This doctrine cut through attachment not only to material things, but even to the teachings themselves. As the Heart Sutra declares, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no attainment, and nothing to attain. This spirit would later be central to Zen's rejection of clinging to scriptures or intellectual understanding. Bodhidharma, the legendary founder of Zen in China. The historical movement of Buddhism into China began in the Han Dynasty, 1st to 2nd century CE, through translations of Indian sutras. Over centuries, Chinese Buddhists absorbed vast numbers of texts and established multiple schools. Yet many struggled with the sheer complexity of doctrine and the alien flavor of Indian thought. Into this world, legend places Bodhidharma, a South Indian or Central Asian monk who arrived in China around the early 6th century. Bodhidharma's story is wrapped in myth. He is said to have meditated facing a wall at Shaolin Monastery for 9 years, so intense in concentration that his legs withered. He supposedly brought both the practice of dhyana, meditation, and exercises that became linked to Shaolin martial arts. While historians debate the accuracy of these tales, the symbolic message is clear. Bodhidharma represented the uncompromising return to direct practice over intellectualization. He is credited with founding Chan, the Chinese pronunciation of dhyana, meditation, which would later become Zen in Japan. His teaching is encapsulated in a famous four-line verse, a special transmission outside the scriptures, not dependent on words and letters, direct pointing to the mind, seeing into one's nature, becoming Buddha. This statement was not a dismissal of text altogether, but a warning against mistaking the finger for the moon. Buddhism had by then amassed an enormous scriptural library. Bodhidharma's Chan cut through it, insisting on the primacy of lived realization. The fusion of Indian Buddhism with Chinese Taoism. For Chan to take root in China, it had to adapt to a culture steeped in Taoism and Confucianism. Taoism emphasized harmony with the natural flow. Tao, spontaneity, simplicity, and non-striving. Themes that resonated deeply with Chan's meditative ethos. Chinese masters began expressing Buddhist insight in Taoist-like language. Instead of abstract metaphysics, they pointed to the immediacy of chopping wood, carrying water, or watching the seasons turn. Mountains and rivers were not metaphors but direct expressions of suchness. Meditation was not escape from the world, but full participation in it, free of clinging. This blending produced a uniquely Chinese form of Buddhism. Where Indian texts often analyze consciousness in fine detail, Chan teachers used paradox, silence, and even shouts or blows to jolt students out of conceptual thinking. The Taoist taste for spontaneity shaped Chan's preference for sudden awakening over gradual cultivation. The Chan school, a special transmission outside the scriptures. By the Tang dynasty, 7th or 9th centuries, Chan had matured into a distinct school. Its hallmark was the method of gongan, koan in Japanese, enigmatic exchanges between master and student that shattered reliance on logic. For example, a monk asked Zhaozhou, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" Zhaozhou replied, "Mu," literally not or nothing. The point was not to deny doctrine, since scriptures affirm all beings have Buddha nature, but to cut through attachment to doctrine itself. Chan emphasized direct pointing. The teacher embodied awakening and transmitted it not by lecture, but by presence, gesture, or sharp challenge. The goal was immediate recognition of one's own Buddha nature. This approach countered the growing tendency of Chinese Buddhism toward elaborate rituals, merit-making ceremonies, and scholastic debates. Chan solved the problem of overcomplication by returning to simplicity. Early masters, Wenang Shengshu and the Platform Sutra. One of the pivotal moments in Chan history was the succession after the fifth patriarch, Hongren, 601-674. According to tradition, Hongren tested his disciples by asking them to compose a verse expressing their understanding. Shengshu, the senior monk, wrote, "The body is the Bodhi tree, the mind a standing mirror bright. Always polish it diligently, and let no dust alight." This verse suggested gradual cultivation, purifying the mind step by step. Huineng, an illiterate layman working in the monastery kitchen, countered, "There is no Bodhi tree, nor stand of a mirror bright. Since all is empty from the beginning, where can dust alight?" This verse pointed to sudden awakening, the realization that one's true nature is already pure and unconditioned. Huineng was secretly given the patriarch's robe and bowl, becoming the sixth patriarch. His teaching, preserved in the Platform Sutra, became foundational for Southern Chan and later Zen. The Platform Sutra emphasized that enlightenment is not attained through gradual effort alone, but can be realized instantly by seeing one's nature. This did not deny the value of discipline, but insisted that awakening is not created. It is recognized. How Zen solved the problem of rigid doctrine and ritual in early Chinese Buddhism. By the Tang and Song dynasties, Chan flourished with diverse lineages. Its methods, meditation, koans, direct encounters, provided a living antidote to the rigidity that had begun to weigh down other Buddhist schools. Where scholastics argued over subtle interpretations of Abhidharma, Chan masters raised a finger, shouted cats, or answered a question with a blow. Their aim was not shock for its own sake, but to snap students into the immediacy of awareness. Ritual was not abandoned, but recontextualized. Bowing, chanting, and daily work were all seen as expressions of practice, not ends in themselves. This democratized awakening, every moment of life, not just formal meditation, was an opportunity for realization. In a society where Buddhism was often entangled with political patronage and monastic wealth, Chan reminded people of the simplicity of the Buddha's original path. Zen's historical emergence in China thus represented a solution to two persistent problems: the ossification of religion into empty ritual, and the paralysis of philosophy into endless speculation. Its answer was not to reject tradition, but to revitalize it through direct, lived experience. 2. Zen in Japan, from monastic practice to cultural force. If the roots of Zen were planted in the fertile soil of Chinese Taoism and Mahayana philosophy, its blossoming occurred when it arrived in Japan. What was carried across the sea was not only a set of teachings, but an atmosphere, a spirit that would profoundly shape Japanese religion, art, architecture, and even the code of the warrior. Yet Zen's story in Japan is not one of unbroken peace or purely spiritual retreat. It is also entangled with politics, war, and questions of identity. To understand Zen as we know it today, the austere temples, the spare gardens, the stillness of the tea room, we must first trace how it traveled and transformed. Transmission of Zen to Japan, Eisai, Dogen, Rinzai versus Soto. Buddhism had already arrived in Japan centuries earlier, around the 6th century, largely through Korea and China. But it was in the late 12th and early 13th centuries that Zen Buddhism specifically came to prominence. Two figures stand out: Eisai, 1141-1215, and Dogen, 1200-1253. Eisai traveled to China, studied Chan practices, and brought back the Rinzai school. He emphasized meditation, but also rituals, discipline, and the protection of the nation through Buddhism. Eisai presented Zen not only as a spiritual practice, but also as a stabilizing force for Japan in a time of political upheaval. A generation later, Dogen journeyed to China seeking authentic teaching. He encountered the Shaodong school, Soto in Japanese, and returned to Japan with a radical emphasis on zazen, seated meditation. Unlike Eisai, who worked closely with political elites, Dogen withdrew to found Aiheiji Monastery, insisting that practice itself was realization. For Dogen, enlightenment was not a distant goal, but already present in the act of sitting itself. The contrast between Rinzai and Soto defines Zen's trajectory in Japan. Rinzai Zen stressed rigorous discipline, koan practice, and often appealed to samurai and elites. Soto Zen emphasized simplicity, rural monasteries, and the practice of shikantaza, just sitting, which rejected striving and clinging. Both schools carried the same essence of Chan, but expressed it differently, reflecting Japan's diverse needs: monastic discipline, meditation halls, and the refinement of practice. Japanese Zen monasteries became laboratories of disciplined living. The Soto, meditation hall, was the heart of practice. Monks followed strict schedules, rising before dawn, periods of zazen, chanting sutras, working in the fields, and communal meals eaten in silence. Everything was practice, from cleaning the temple floors to walking mindfully in line. The Zen monastery embodied Dogen's teaching that practice and enlightenment are one. Every action was an opportunity to express awakening: eating rice, washing bowls, chopping wood. These were not mundane tasks, but gateways to realization. This radical non-duality between sacred and ordinary infused Japanese Zen culture and made it accessible beyond the cloister. Koan practice in Rinzai Zen, in Shikantaza and Soto Zen. One of the most distinctive features of Japanese Zen was the refinement of meditative methods. Rinzai Zen and koan practice. A koan is a paradoxical question or dialogue from Chan masters meant to shatter conceptual thinking. Under the guidance of a master, a monk would grapple with koans such as, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Or, "What was your face before your parents were born?" The struggle was not intellectual but existential. The koan demanded the whole being. When insight, satori, struck, it was often sudden and transformative. Soto Zen and Shikantaza, just sitting. In contrast, Soto Zen under Dogen emphasized Shikantaza, sitting without object, without koan, simply resting in awareness. The practice was not a means to an end, but the full expression of enlightenment here and now. In this, Soto Zen embodied Dogen's radical claim. Zazen is itself enlightenment. These two approaches created a dynamic balance in Japanese Zen. The sharp, dramatic breakthroughs of Rinzai alongside the quiet, subtle unfolding of Soto. Both cut through striving, though by different means. Zen in the arts, tea ceremony, gardens, calligraphy, haiku, and martial practice. Perhaps nowhere did Zen leave a more visible mark than in Japanese culture. Monks and lay practitioners infused everyday activities with Zen's spirit of simplicity, awareness, and beauty. Tea ceremony, shanoyu. Developed by Sen no Rikyu in the 16th century, the tea ceremony was less about drinking tea than embodying mindfulness, harmony, and humility. Every gesture, the way the tea is whisked, the silence in the room, the simple ceramic bowls became an expression of Zen aesthetics. Zen gardens, Karsansui. The dry rock gardens of Ryoanji or Daisinin embody emptiness and form. Raked gravel, placed stones, and moss evoke mountains, rivers, and islands. They invite contemplation not through abundance, but through stark simplicity, pointing to the vastness within minimalism. Calligraphy and painting, Zen monks brush single characters, mu, heart, nothingness, with bold strokes that captured spontaneity and presence. The act of painting was meditation in motion, embodying the moment without correction. Haiku poetry. Poets like Basho carried Zen's attentiveness into verse. 17 syllables could open the vastness of existence. A frog jumping into an old pond, the sound of water. Haiku reflects the Zen spirit of piercing immediacy and the sacredness of the ordinary. Martial arts. Samurai found in Zen a mental discipline that complemented their training. Swordsmanship, archery, and martial arts were infused with mindfulness, presence, and acceptance of death. The way of the sword is the way of Zen, some masters declared. Through these arts, Zen addressed not only monks but lay people, embedding itself in the fabric of Japanese life. Zen during periods of political upheaval, samurai, shogunate, and war. Zen's rise coincided with turbulent centuries in Japan, shifting power between emperors, shoguns, and warring clans. Zen monasteries often enjoyed the patronage of the samurai and the ruling elite. The discipline of Zen resonated with the warrior ethos, calm under pressure, clarity in the face of death, and loyalty. During the Kamakura and Muromachi periods, Zen became intertwined with the shogunate. Monasteries accumulated wealth, land, and influence. While this allowed Zen to flourish artistically and architecturally, it also created tensions. Critics accused Zen of compromising its spiritual integrity by serving political powers. In later centuries, Zen's association with the samurai meant it was sometimes drawn into militarism, especially during World War II. This controversial history raises enduring questions about the balance between spiritual purity and worldly entanglement. How Zen addressed social and spiritual crises in medieval Japan. Medieval Japan faced famine, war, and uncertainty. In this context, Zen offered both stability and solace. Its emphasis on simplicity provided an antidote to the extravagance of court life. Its focus on discipline gave warriors inner strength. Its arts provided beauty amid chaos. Most importantly, Zen offered a way to find liberation not by escaping the world, but by fully engaging it. For peasants, tending rice fields with mindfulness could be as sacred as a monk's meditation. For warriors, facing death with equanimity was itself awakening. For poets, a falling leaf or a bird's cry became a doorway to the infinite. In a world of impermanence, Zen taught not to cling, but to flow, to meet each moment fully, whether in joy or sorrow. The balance between spiritual depth and cultural expression. Zen in Japan thus walked a delicate line. On one side, the danger of losing depth by becoming mere cultural aesthetic, calligraphy as decoration, gardens as tourist sites, tea ceremony as performance. On the other side, the risk of retreating into monastic seclusion, disconnected from society. The genius of Japanese Zen was its ability to hold both. Monks pursued rigorous practice in monasteries, while lay people absorbed Zen's spirit through art, ritual, and daily life. Zen became both a path of profound inner transformation and a cultural force shaping architecture, literature, and even statecraft. What held these together was the insight that enlightenment is not separate from life. Whether sweeping a temple floor or arranging flowers in a tea room, the essence of Zen was the same: to meet reality as it is, with clarity, simplicity, and compassion. Zen in the modern world: globalization, challenges, and renewal. When Zen crossed from Japan to the West, it entered a world far removed from the rice fields, monasteries, and tea houses that had nurtured it for centuries. The Industrial Revolution, two world wars, the rise of psychology, and the spread of consumer capitalism created entirely new landscapes of suffering and confusion. And yet, in this unfamiliar territory, Zen adapted once again, offering tools to address the anxieties of modernity. Its history in the West is not just about transplantation, but transformation, a process that continues to this day as Zen seeks to remain authentic while meeting the needs of a globalized world. Zen's encounter with the West in the 19th and 20th centuries. The 19th century saw the first sparks of dialogue between Zen and Western intellectuals. Early European scholars, fascinated by Asian religions, translated Buddhist texts, yet these were often filtered through Christian or colonial lenses, missing the living essence of Zen. The real turning point came in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as Japanese scholars and monks began presenting Zen abroad. D.T. Suzuki, 1870–1966, played a pivotal role. A prolific writer and translator, Suzuki introduced Zen to Western audiences not as a dry philosophy, but as a living experience, direct, intuitive, beyond dogma. His books shaped the beat poets, philosophers like Alan Watts, and even psychologists like Carl Jung. World War II disrupted cultural exchange, but in the post-war period, Zen entered the bloodstream of Western counterculture. The 1950s and 1960s saw an explosion of interest in meditation, Eastern spirituality, and alternatives to materialism. Zen's emphasis on freedom, spontaneity, and direct realization resonated deeply with a generation disillusioned with conformity. Pioneers: D.T. Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki, and the spread of Zen centers. While D.T. Suzuki provided intellectual entry points, it was Zen masters like Shunryu Suzuki, 1904–1971, who planted Zen's roots in the soil of Western practice. Suzuki Roshi arrived in San Francisco in 1959, quietly teaching Zazen to a small group of students. His humility and warmth, combined with his deep commitment to practice, inspired the creation of the San Francisco Zen Center, one of the most influential Zen institutions in America. His book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, became a classic, capturing Zen's essence with disarming simplicity. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Other figures carried Zen across continents. Taizen Maizumi founded the Zen Center of Los Angeles, integrating Rinzai koan practice with Soto sitting. Philip Kapleau, an American student of Japanese masters, authored The Three Pillars of Zen, introducing rigorous training to Western readers. Thich Nhat Hanh, though Vietnamese, brought a Zen-influenced mindfulness tradition to the West, emphasizing peace and engaged practice. By the late 20th century, Zen centers had sprouted across North America and Europe. Some remained traditional, maintaining robes, rituals, and monastic discipline. Others adapted, offering lay practice for busy householders. Zen had become a global tradition. Zen in psychology, mindfulness, therapy, and the science of meditation. One of the most fertile dialogues has been between Zen and psychology. Western psychology, originally focused on pathology, began turning toward wellness and human potential in the 20th century. Zen, with its emphasis on awareness, non-attachment, and compassion, provided tools that fit naturally into therapeutic frameworks. Carl Jung saw parallels between Zen and the process of individuation. Later, humanistic psychologists like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow drew on Zen's vision of self-actualization. In the late 20th century, mindfulness-based therapies explicitly incorporated Buddhist practice. John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, though rooted more in theravada mindfulness, carried strong Zen influence in its emphasis on presence and non-judgmental awareness. Neuroscience has since confirmed many of Zen's insights. Brain imaging shows how meditation reshapes neural pathways, strengthens attention, reduces reactivity, and fosters emotional balance. Zen practice, once seen as mystical, is now studied as a scientifically validated method for cultivating well-being. Yet Zen also resists being reduced to stress reduction. It points not merely to calmer minds but to liberation from the illusion of self, a transformation deeper than psychology alone. The risk of commercialization and instant Zen. With popularity came pitfalls. In the West, Zen sometimes became a brand. Minimalist decor, Zen gardens sold in office stores, or corporate workshops promising Zen productivity. Books and retreats often marketed Zen as a quick fix for stress, stripped of discipline and depth. This commodification risks hollowing out Zen's essence. The danger is that Zen becomes another consumer product, a way to polish the ego rather than dissolve it. Some teachers warn that without rigorous practice, Zen degenerates into aesthetic appreciation, an exotic lifestyle accessory rather than a transformative path. The challenge is balance, making Zen accessible without diluting it, offering tools for modern life without losing the radical edge that shatters illusions. True Zen cannot be bought or sold. It must be lived. Zen and activism, social justice, peace movements, and ecological awareness. Though often portrayed as detached from the world, modern Zen has also inspired activism. The horrors of the 20th century, world wars, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, demanded responses. Zen practitioners began asking, how can awareness translate into compassionate action? Engaged Buddhism, articulated by Thich Nhat Hanh, brought mindfulness into peace activism during the Vietnam War. His call to walk as if you are kissing the earth with your feet inspired movements for nonviolence and ecological care. Zen communities have supported civil rights and anti-war protests and environmental movements, seeing compassion as inseparable from practice. Ecological awareness especially resonates with Zen's teaching of interdependence. Gardens, forests, and rivers are not resources to be exploited, but expressions of the same reality we embody. Protecting them is not charity, but self-preservation. Zen activism avoids anger and hatred, emphasizing clarity and compassion even in the face of injustice. This offers a unique model for social change: strong yet peaceful, engaged yet unattached. How Zen offers solutions for modern crises: stress, alienation, consumerism. The crises of modern life echo those the Buddha faced: suffering, dissatisfaction, confusion. But today they appear in new forms: chronic stress, alienation in digital societies, consumerism that never satisfies. Zen speaks directly to these issues. Stress. Zen meditation calms the nervous system, but more importantly, it changes our relationship to thoughts and emotions. Instead of fighting them, we witness them, allowing them to pass. Alienation. In a fragmented world, Zen reorients us to direct experience: the breath, the body, the moment. It restores intimacy with life. Consumerism. Zen undercuts the endless chase for more by pointing to sufficiency here and now. A simple meal, a quiet walk, a single breath fully lived can be more fulfilling than endless acquisition. Zen thus addresses not only personal well-being, but the cultural diseases of modernity. The vision of Zen for the 21st century: clarity, compassion, and awakening without borders. As Zen enters the 21st century, it faces both opportunity and responsibility. Never before has it been so global, practiced by people of every background, in monasteries, urban centers, and online communities. Never before have its teachings been so urgently needed as humanity faces climate collapse, political polarization, and technological overload. The vision for modern Zen is not to become a world religion in the traditional sense, but a world practice, a way of living awake across cultures and contexts. It is clarity, cutting through the noise of information overload to see reality as it is. Compassion, extending awareness into action that heals suffering in individuals, societies, and ecosystems. Awakening without borders, transcending East and West, monk and layperson, tradition and innovation. Zen's future may not lie in rigid institutions, but in networks of practitioners who bring presence into every domain: education, healthcare, business, ecology, art, and politics. Wherever there is breath, there is the possibility of awakening. Conclusion: Zen is renewal. From India's forests to China's monasteries, from Japanese tea houses to Western urban centers, Zen has continually reinvented itself while holding true to its essence, awakening here and now. Its history is not a museum of artifacts, but a living tradition responding to the problems of each age. Today, as humanity faces crises of meaning and survival, Zen offers not dogma, but practice, not escape, but engagement, not promises of heaven, but the invitation to wake up. In this breath, in this step, in this fragile, beautiful world. The story of Zen's globalization is not finished. It is being written by every practitioner who sits in silence, who drinks tea with awareness, who acts with compassion in a troubled world. If Zen has one message for the 21st century, it is this: live awake here and now.